If you are new to the game of chess, you are in the right place. I'm going to teach you not only how to play, including the special moves like castling and en passant, but I'm also going to teach you how to start winning. I'm going to teach you some basic strategies that you can apply today. As soon as you finish this video, you'll be able to go out and do these things and start winning some games. If you're new to the channel, my name is Nelson. I've been teaching chess here on Chess Vibes for the last several years. And in the next 20 minutes or so, you are going to learn a ton about the game of chess. Let's get started. All right, first things first, the object of the game of chess is to checkmate your opponent's king. Essentially, what that means is you're going to be trapping their king to where they can't get away from a check. Okay, so a check in chess is when a piece attacks the king. Now, we're going to learn how the pieces move in just a second, but remember, you want to attack the king and trap it, and if you achieve that and your opponent has no way to get out of it, that is checkmate, and you win the game. The kings always have this little cross on top of them. That's kind of how you can tell them apart from the queens, okay? Like I mentioned, the queens, the kings. We also have these bishops over here, the knights next to the bishops. The rooks are in the corner, and then, of course, the pawns are in the front. All right, we're going to talk about how all of these move right now. All right, here we go on the empty board. The king is a very simple piece. It just moves one square in any direction. That's it. Super simple, super basic. That's all you have to remember. It just moves one. You can move sideways, then it's your opponent's turn. You can move back, then it's your opponent's turn. You can move diagonally. One square in any direction. Because of this, you have to be careful exposing your king because it can't move very far. It's not going to be able to immediately get out of danger. Okay, something to keep in the back of your mind. All right, let's go next to the rook. Now, the rook simply moves in a straight line. It can be up and down like this. It can be left and right like this. And the nice thing about the rook is it can go as far as it wants. So you can move all the way over here, and then on your next turn, you can move all the way over here. You can move all the way up here. You can see how it can cover a lot of ground in a single move. Okay, now, of course, you have to pay attention if there are other pieces in the way. So something like this, you cannot move through or over pieces. So if in this position, I could not move to these squares. I could not move here, okay, because the pawns are blocking me, right? I would be stuck like this, but I could move anywhere over here, all right? So rooks cannot jump over pieces, but they are very powerful. Let's go next to the bishop. The bishop simply moves in a diagonal direction. So any diagonal line, the bishop can move on it, just like the rook as far as it wants to. So you can also cover a lot of ground with the bishop. You can move there. You can move all the way across the board this way. But again, if there are pieces in your way, you cannot move that direction because they are blocking you. Okay, so in this position, I can move backwards, but I would not be able to move forwards. Okay, those are the bishops. Also a powerful piece, not quite as good as the rook. Next up, we're going to talk about the queen. Now, the queen is just like a rook and a bishop combined. Okay, so if you imagine the rook can move straight any direction, and the bishop can move diagonal any direction. That is exactly what the queen does, all right? So again, as far as she wants to move, as long as there are no pieces blocking her. The queen is the most powerful piece on the chessboard. And I mean, you can just see all the squares that it can cover, right? Very, very powerful piece. You have to be extremely careful about losing your queen because if you lose it, that's a big disadvantage. But at the same time, if you can capture your opponent's queen, that's a very good thing, all right? Let's keep going. The knight. Now, the knight is an interesting piece. It moves in an L shape, okay? So like this would be an L. It could move there, or you can do an L like this. Any configuration of an L would work, okay? Like this. So essentially what you get are these squares, okay? L shape. But what makes the knight interesting is that it can jump over pieces. This is the only piece on a chessboard that can do this. So even if by some magic, my knight was magically surrounded here by pawns, guess what? I could still move it. I could still move it here, or here, anywhere I want, because it doesn't matter. I can jump over the pieces, okay? So, these squares. So that is the knight, okay? And that's a very unique and powerful ability in some situations. Even though the knight itself, you know, it's kind of limited in how quickly and how far it can move across the board, the fact that it can jump is very important, okay? So we've talked about all the pieces except the pawns. And the funny thing about the pawns is that even though they are the weakest piece on the board, they're the most tricky to understand how they move, okay? So they move forward one space. And you probably say, well, Nelson, that's not very tricky. It's pretty simple. They just move one space. Okay, I got it, right? Here's where it gets tricky. Pawns move one way, but they capture a different way. That's different from any other piece on the chessboard. So let me just take the rook, for example. Let's just say black had a bishop sitting here. If I wanted to capture that bishop with my rook, I would simply move there and capture it. So I would just go right on top of it, and I would capture the bishop. It's that simple. You move on top of a square, you take a piece. Makes sense. The pawn, however, is different. Pawns move one space forward, sorry, like this, like I mentioned, but they capture diagonally one space. Okay? So what does this mean? If there's a black bishop here and I want to take it, can I do that? Yes, that's how pawns capture. They capture diagonally. But if there's a bishop in front of me, can I move forward and capture it? No, I cannot, because pawns, remember, they move one way, they capture another way, all right? This is why pawns are a little bit weird and a little bit tricky when you first get started, okay? They're the only piece that does this. But all you have to remember is they can move forward if it's an open square, like this, this. But as soon as there's a piece there, they're stuck unless you have the option to capture a piece that might be sitting over here. For example, if there's another pawn over here, guess what? I could take that, okay? The other thing about pawns is that at the start of the game, they get this bonus option that if they want, they can do it, and they can move 2 spaces forward. Normally, it's only 1, but at the start of the game, if they want, they can move 2. And every single pawn gets the option to do that if they want. One time, the first move that they make, you can move them 2 spaces. You don't have to. You can always do just 1. But if you want, you can do 2. And after you've moved it anything, there's no more double moves. Okay, you only get 1 chance at the start to do that. All right? So pawns are a little bit... Oh, one more thing about pawns, I just remembered. Pawns cannot move backwards. Again, the only piece that cannot move backward. All the other pieces, if you want, you can move it out and you can move it back. You can move it out, you can move it back. Every other piece, right? Pawns, it's stuck. There's no going back. So that's something to keep in your mind. Like if you move those pawns forward, they're not coming back. So be careful with, your pawn moves. Okay? That's it, guys. That's how all of the pieces move. Now, that might seem like a lot, but trust me, once you start playing and practicing, it's going to become second nature in no time. Okay? Now, let's talk about the king and checkmate, because ultimately that's how you win the game. It doesn't matter how many pieces you take, right? You have to get checkmate. So let's go ahead, clear the board here. We're going to put some kings on now. White king and a black king. And let's talk about check and checkmate. So the first thing I want to show you guys is a check. Check is when the opponent's king is attacked. Okay, so if I'm white and I move here, I would say check. Check to my opponent's king. Why? Because I'm attacking it with the rook. And black now is obligated to get out of check. When it's your turn, you have to get out of check. You can't make another move that keeps you in check. So for example, could the king move here? No, because that's still going to be check from the rook. Remember, the rook covers all of these squares, right? So where does the king have to move? Well, any of these moves to the side, right? So the king can move over here. Check again. I could keep attacking the king. Check again. But what you might notice is that I'm not actually winning the game because every time I do this, the king simply escapes. Okay, so now let's talk about checkmate. For checkmate, I'm going to give white another rook here. I'm going to actually do it like this. I'm going to give white these 2 rooks, and now we're going to see what happens now. So we're going to move this rook here, puts the king in check, and notice if black tries to move this way, what's going to happen? Well, there's a rook right here. Guess what? That's going to be check. You can never move into a check when you're playing chess. So those moves are off the table. You can't move there. Let me use red. You can't move there, and you can't stay there because you're under check from the rook. Okay, so what does black have to do? Go over this way. And guess what? I'm going to go check with this rook. And notice how I'm using these rooks to make these like laser beams that are forcing the king over. It just has to keep moving over, right? Over here. Check again. Look at this. Boom, boom. And now we have what is called checkmate. I'm going to go right here. This is checkmate. And the reason it's checkmate is because the king is attacked. It's in check. It has to get out. But it can't move anywhere because all of these squares are covered by my rooks. So the king has no legal moves. The game is over. White wins by checkmate. That's how you win. You have to trap the king somehow with a combination of your pieces. In this case, we used 2 rooks. Of course, you could do it with any combination. Let me show you another one here. I might have my king up here and my queen is sitting over here. I can move it right here, and guess what? That is a different way to checkmate the king. Notice how the queen, remember, goes all different directions, is controlling all these squares that the king might like to move to, and my king is actually helping. That's another thing. The king can help. King can control squares. Kings can never move next to each other, so black wouldn't be able to take me because they'd be putting themselves in check. Okay, so this is another example of a checkmate. Another one, I can move here. Same idea. I'm attacking the king, and if it tries to escape, my king is there covering it up. Okay, so that is chess. That's it. You now know how to play chess. That's it. Now, There are three special moves in chess that I'm going to talk about now. The first one is what's called castling. Okay, it's a special move between your king and your rook. And the way it works is like this. Let's say you're playing a game, you move your pawn out, your opponent moves their pawn out. Remember, 2 spaces on the first move, right? We can do that, so we're going to do that. Let's say we bring our knight out. Remember, we can jump over pieces with the knight in an L shape. Let's say our opponent does the same thing. Bishop, diagonally, right? We're going to bring it out. Let's just say to here. Let's say our opponent does this knight out. We now have the option to castle our king with the king and a rook. Okay, it's essentially a king and a rook move. And what you do is you move your king over 2 spaces. Now, if you remember, I said the king can only move 1 space at a time. So this is the only situation where you get to move your king 2 spaces at the same time. Okay, so this is a special thing. You move it over 2, and the rook is going to jump on the other side. Now, when you're playing a game, a real game, this is going to happen automatically if it's online. If you're playing over the board, you would have to do this yourself, right? You grab the king, you move it, you grab the rook, you put it on the other side. But when, like I said, when you're playing on chess.com, normally, as soon as you put the king there, it's just going to jump the rook over for you. Okay? That's castling. That's the special move. You can do it on both sides of the board. Let's go back and I'll show you an example from this way. You bring out your knight. And notice the important thing is you have to clear the pieces out of the way before you can do it. You can't do it if the pieces are in the way, right? So let's bring our bishop out. Let's bring the queen up. And let's say we want to castle over here. The way that you do it is you move your king over 2 spaces. Notice it's always the king moves 2 spaces. You never jump all the way next to the rook. That would be 3 spaces, right? 1, 2, 3, that's too far. It's always 2 spaces with the king, and the rook is going to immediately jump over to the other side. I just castled queen side. Okay, so you can castle king side, you can castle queen side, all right? These are usually powerful moves, and usually you want to try to castle in a game of chess. It's a good thing to do. A couple of things about castling that you have to understand. If you've moved your king previously, you cannot do it. So let's say this is the position. I decide I'm going to move my king here. Black goes here. I move back. And now I'm like, okay, now I want to castle. No, no, no. You move your king, you lose castling rights. So something to keep in mind, right? Same thing applies to a rook. Let's say I move my rook over, and then I move it back, and I'm like, now I want to castle? No. You moved your rook, you can't castle in that direction. You still castle this way with your other rook, as long as you don't move your king. Okay? The other thing about this, let me show you one more example here. Let's say we're getting ready to castle. We bring out this knight, bring out this bishop. We would like to castle next move, but our opponent plays this move, check. You might say, well, Nelson, yeah, castling looks like a great move because I get out of the check, get my king over here to safety. I should do it, right? You are not allowed to castle if you are in check. So no, you can't do that, right? You would have to get out of the check first. Maybe you block it. They move somewhere. And now if you want, you could castle. Okay, so you can't castle in check. And you also can't castle if it would put your king, if your king passes through a check. So let me show you an example. This is kind of a rare situation, but I want to make sure you guys know all the rules. There's no question. Let's just say this is the position. This is a weird position, I know, because there's like no pieces on the board. But let's just say you were trying to castle. The problem is this bishop is controlling this square. And when you castle, you want to think about it as if your king is moving over 2 spaces, right? One at a time, 1, 2. You can't do that because you're putting yourself in check on the first one. So you're not allowed to castle in this situation. Now, if you had a rook over here, guess what? I could castle over here because there's nothing, stopping my king from going here. So I could just simply castle like this. Okay? That's castling, all right? Now, I know that maybe sounded like a lot, but trust me, it's really pretty simple. Get the pieces out of the way, move your king over, the rook jumps to the other side. That's it, okay? The second special move in chess is called pawn promotion. These pawns, if they make it to the other side of the board, actually can become any piece that they want to become. So let's just imagine, and this is a very weird game, but let's just say this is what happens. We're pushing our pawn all the way down. Our opponent, for whatever reason, doesn't stop us. We capture, right? Remember, we take diagonally. Let's say they go here, and they allow us to capture this rook. When we do this, we now get the option. If you're playing online, it's going to pop up a little window, but basically, and you choose which piece do you want. Now, normally, you're going to want to choose a queen because the queen is the best piece. But you could choose a rook, you could choose a knight, or you could choose a bishop. And there are, believe it or not, there are situations where you would want those pieces. As crazy as it might seem, you'll learn about that later in your chess career. But for right now, you're just going to be getting a queen, okay? And you can have multiple queens. Notice I have 2 queens on the board. I could have another one. If I get another pawn down here and do this, I could have, technically, you could have 9 queens. That would be possible, right? It's rare because usually your opponent's going to be like, what are you doing? I'm going to take your pawn if you push it all the way down there. It usually happens at the end of the game, right? After a lot of the pieces get traded off. If you imagine we've played a long game and there's just a few pawns left on the board, maybe something like this, and we're playing the game. This would be a situation where maybe one of these pawns could become a queen. Maybe this one could become a queen. That's when you see it a lot, okay? So castling and pawn promotion. And now we get to talk about probably the most complicated move. It's really not that complicated, but it's the move that causes the most confusion. It's called en passant. It's a special move that involves the pawns, okay? Now, we already talked about how the pawns have a lot going on. Well, I'm going to add one more final thing. Promise this is the last rule in chess, okay, that you're going to learn. So e4, let's just say we play here. Our opponent goes here. We go here. And our opponent moves this pawn up 2 spaces. Remember, they can do that if they want. They move it up 2 spaces, and it lands side by side our pawn, okay? We have the option to play a special move called en passant, where we capture that pawn like this. So we'd move the pawn here, and this guy would disappear. Say, whoa, that's weird, Nelson, right? It's really not that weird if you think about it from this perspective. Imagine if they would have, instead of moving 2, they decided, you know what? I just want to move 1. Guess what? We could just take it. That's how pawns capture. We just take diagonally. That's pretty straightforward. Nothing weird there, right? Well, en passant basically says, look, you can do the same thing even if they move 2. They can move 2 spaces. Guess what? You could still have the option to take it. Now, the thing about en passant is you only get one chance to do it for that particular pawn. So as soon as they play this move, if you want to en passant it, you have to do it right now. You can't make another move and then, you come back later and, yeah, I think I'm going to en passant now. No. You get one chance. You want to do it? Do it. If not, fine. You don't have to, but you can. In this position, we cannot en passant this way. Why? Because this pawn did not move 2 spaces. It was already sitting there when we pushed up. Different situation, right? It has to be they move, that's when you do it. Okay? So let me give you another example just to make sure this is clear. If they go here and we don't want to take it, we do something else. And now they go here. Can we en passant? What do you guys think? Yes or no? The answer is no, because they did not just move 2 spaces. They only moved 1 space, right? So keep that in mind. They have to move 2 spaces in the same move. That's when en passant becomes an option. If you would like, you can take it. This can happen with any pawn. So imagine if, let's say black goes here. We do, I don't know, this. Black goes here. And we play the move h4. Black now has the option to en passant us, right? Because this pawn moved up 2 spaces, landed side by side. They can capture us, and this goes away. Okay? So any pawn, anywhere, if they move 2 spaces and land side by side, you have the option to capture it. Okay? All right, guys. And maybe that sounded like a lot, but that's it. You now know how to play chess. You literally know everything there is to know about how to play a game of chess. Okay? However, I said I'm going to teach you not only how to play, but how to win. So let's go ahead and jump into that. So when you're playing chess, what most people do when they first start is they're like, well, there's a lot happening. I don't really know what to do. I'm just going to move a pawn because I don't know. Yeah, what am I going to do? Let's just move another pawn. This is what beginners generally do. Yeah, let's push this pawn and maybe just keep pushing it. Oh, it's stuck now. All right. Well, maybe I'll bring my rook out, because I don't know. Rook seems like a good piece. This is how beginners play chess, right? It's not how you want to play chess. Let me just explain. The center of the board, these 4 squares, is the most important part of a chessboard. Okay, why is that the case? Because a piece in the center can do more than a piece in the corner, right? Let me give you an example of this. My knight, where it's at right now, can go to 3 spaces. 1, 2, 3. That's not bad, but if I put it in the center, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 places. That's a lot better than 3, right? If it's on the edge of the board, I have 4 places, which is it's okay. But it's not as good as 8, right, in the center. So that's just a quick example of why the center of the board is crucial, okay? That's the first thing you need to understand. So don't be playing moves like this, and like this, and like this, because these moves are not helping you in the center, okay? Remember that. So what do you want to do? You want to move both of these pawns up into the center if possible, okay? This is the ideal starting position. Get your knights as close to the center as you can. Notice how they're controlling all of these central squares, right? Look at this guy. That's what you want to do. Bishop's probably here or here, okay? Let's just say here and here. This is like the perfect setup. Okay, look at this. I have of all my pieces controlling the center of the board. Okay? The second thing, development. That's a term in chess that means moving your knights and your bishops off of the back rank. It's called developing your pieces. Okay? Super important. You do not want to make so many pawn moves. You want to make 1, maybe 2 pawn moves, and then you want to get your pieces out. Okay, I'm just making bad moves for black here to make it easy for me, but I want to just demonstrate. This is what you want to do. Get your knights out first. Get your bishops out to good places like this, okay? If you do that, you're going to be way ahead of most people who first start playing chess. Way ahead. Okay? The third thing that you want to do is castle your king before move 10. Before move 10, what does that mean? That means just do it quickly. Like, hurry up, get your pieces out and castle, right? Let's say black castles over here. We're going to castle, okay? Do those three things. You're going to be, like I said, way ahead. And then you start, well, we'll come to that in just a second. Then you start looking for ways to capture pieces, which we'll talk about in just a second. But I want to talk about one thing here. When you push your pawn up and you're trying to get both pawns in the center, a lot of times what happens is your opponent does the same thing, okay? They stop you from getting the other pawn there unless you're willing to lose it and allow them to capture it, right? So the easiest thing to do when this happens is, first of all, keep getting your knights out, right? Always want to start with your knights. That's generally a good idea, knights before bishops. And once you've gotten your knights out, what I want you to do is bring your bishop out first before you move the other pawn. Why am I doing that? Because I don't want my bishop to get stuck behind the pawn. Remember, bishops cannot jump over pieces. So let's back up. If I were to simply move this pawn up one space, I block my bishop. Okay, so what we're going to do is get the bishop out first, here or here, whatever's a safe square. And then you're going to push the pawn up just one, okay, because we don't want to get captured, right? And then, I don't know, black's going to do something. Then you can get the other bishop out. Okay, so notice how I still managed to get all of my pieces out, even though black kind of was stopping me from getting my pawn in the center. Now, of course, there are openings where you can actually push that pawn forward anyway, and you're just going to get some trades, which is fine. You can learn about openings later. But for right now, this is a very simple thing to do, okay? So we're controlling the center, number one. Number two, we're developing our pieces as quickly as we can. Get them off of the back rank, specifically the knights and the bishops. And number three, we're castling before move 10. Okay, so black does something. I think it's black's turn. I don't even remember. We're going to castle before move 10. We're good to go. And now you just want to start looking for good trades. So to help you with the trades, the last thing I'm going to tell you guys, pawns are worth 1 point. Knights and bishops are worth 3 points. Rooks are worth 5 points. The queen is worth 9 points. And that's a good way to think about it when you're playing a game of chess. So should I, if it's my turn, should I take this pawn with my bishop? No. And it's basic math. This is 1 point. This is 3 points. Do I want to give up my 3-point bishop to just get a 1-point pawn? Oh, it makes no sense. However, what if my opponent does this? It puts a rook there. Do I want to give up my 3-point bishop for a 5-point rook? Yes, absolutely. I do. I should take that. Okay? That's how you want to be thinking, right? Here's another example. Let's just say my queen is sitting here. Do I want to give up my queen for the rook? No. Why? Because this is 5 points and this is 9 points. Okay? And if you follow that rule of thumb as you play the game, by the end of the game, if you keep making good trades, you're just going to have a much better position. Trust me when I say those point values are very, very good to use. Unless you're a grand master and you know some exception, some reason for why you should not follow those, that's basically what you want to follow. Okay? That's it, guys. You know how to play chess, and if you follow, the tips that I mentioned, you're going to win games. Okay? If you want to learn more advanced things like tactics and openings and different endgame strategies and techniques, make sure you subscribe. I have tons of videos here where we go over all kinds of different stuff. The search bar is your friend. Search on the channel. Lots of different things you can learn about. But yeah, I wanted to just put this together to get you guys started if you are new to chess. And it's a fun game. You can play it for your whole life and still never totally master it. But I hope you guys enjoy it. Go out there and get your first win and make sure let me know how it turns out. Thank you guys. Stay sharp, play smart, and take care.